Elizabeth de la Vega is with us. She been on the show many times. Former federal prosecutor, member of the Organized Crime Strike Force, chief of the San Jose branch of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of California, author of The United States versus George W. Bush et al. She writes over at truthout.org. Elizabeth, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Thom.
Great to have you back. You have a very thoughtful piece on that on Monday was published on Truthout. And rather than trying to characterize it, let me just ask you to summarize it for our listeners.
Okay, well, in one sentence, I guess my point was that I believe, based on my experience as a prosecutor for all those years, that appointing a special prosecutor, which would lead inevitably, probably the very next day, to a grand jury investigation, would be basically the equivalent of dumping the entire issue of torture into a black, and we would not, it would provide anybody who wanted a convenient excuse to avoid the issue with an opportunity to just say, oh, there's a grand jury investigation going on. So,
right. As happened when Patrick Fitzgerald was going after Scooter Libby, for example. And therefore, a lot of the stuff about Cheney, a lot of people just said, I'm sorry, I can't talk about a grand jury.
Exactly. In fact, I think that was, I hate to say it, but a very brilliant, calculated move on the part of the Bush administration, because they allowed for the appointment of a special prosecutor in September 2003, which enabled them to skirt the entire issue throughout the 2004 election campaign. And I actually believe had something to do with him getting reelected or being able to be reelected. And we have these other two so-called special prosecutor investigations going on right now, one into the destruction of the tapes by the CIA and the other into the U.S. Attorney firings. And I think if people look around, they're realizing that they're not hearing too much about that either.
Now, in 1999, there was a special prosecutor, or please clarify this for me. I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to understand the subtleties, the nuance of this. In 1999, a law expired that was used, as I recall, rather vigorously in the 90s against President Clinton.
Oh, absolutely. It was the infamous Kenneth Starr.
Yes.
Was an independent prosecutor.
Independent prosecutor.
Yeah, as was actually it was the independent counsel statute is what it was, and then also Lawrence Walsh of the Iran-Contra investigation was an independent.
Now Walsh was, keeping his own confidence, but Ken Starr's, his office was leaking like a sieve. Was the independent counsel bound to different rules than a special prosecutor and grand jury?
No, they weren't. They were supposed to be following the rules, but Kenneth Starr was not. He was completely unprofessional. But even with that, the critical piece to that fact about the statute expires is that we don't have anything now that creates an independent counsel, really. Right. All we have are two different mechanisms under Department of Justice regulations, and no matter how you slice it, the person would still actually be removable at will.
By the Attorney General.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, in the case of what we would think of as an outside person put in, that person would be subject to a great deal of oversight. So if people are concerned that there's some kind of fix within the Department of Justice, which I actually do not subscribe to that point of view, then why they would want a special prosecutor is beyond me, because it wouldn't help.
Yeah, I get that, and it makes tremendous sense that rather than having a special prosecutor, we should go down on other roads, and I'd like to explore with you what those other roads might be. But just to stick with the independent counsel for a moment, Ken Starr was far from independent and heavily politicized not only the office but also ultimately the report, which read like soft porn. And in some cases, hardcore porn, in fact.
Right.
And I think it left a very bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And frankly, I wouldn't want another Ken Starr. I mean, that was so badly done. He was so, well, I need not go on at length about this. Are you suggesting that we should bring back the Office of Independent Counsel?
No, okay. I'm not. No, I completely agree with you, because what it does is it places so much power in the hands of one person.
Right.
And I wrote this piece really as a way of responding to things that I've read in the progressive media and calls for these special prosecutors and so forth. And I really wanted to make or help people to understand the reality of it, because a special prosecutor concept is right now completely illusory. There is no such thing. And what we would do is we would put it all in the hands of one person. Now, it might be, John Adams. But even with that, the downside would be that it would be completely secret for years.
Right, and basically shut down all public discourse of this thing, which is, frankly, in your opinion, apparently, and certainly in mine, what we need more than anything else. So we're talking with Elizabeth de la Vega, by the way, a former federal prosecutor, member of the Organized Crime Strike Force, and author of The United States versus George Bush et al., writing over at truthout.org. Her most recent piece, Of Black Holes and Radio Silence, is the title of it, and I recommend you read it. And so, Elizabeth, you're suggesting that rather than appointing a special prosecutor, rather than going the grand jury route, we should do what?
Well, I don't have a perfect answer, because I think this is complicated, and that is exactly another one of my points. To think that there's some surefire fix is false. But I think that the best approach would be something along the lines of what President Obama was talking about yesterday, and Carl Levin is talking about as well. A nonpartisan group of individuals to look into this. And what needs to happen, the critical element of that, is that any interviews have to be public.
So this should be done by Congress?
No, I think it should be, there needs to be a nonpartisan group, and I know people have a lot of gut reactions about the 9/11 Commission, but there are people out there who are nonpartisan. There are many judges, in fact, retired federal judges, are people who made their ranks up through U.S. attorneys' offices. So they're not actually, especially ones who are older, are not actually political. So there need to be people who are intimately familiar with criminal law, criminal prosecutions, and they need to know how to approach a set of facts in view of the law.
But if they're appointed by the Obama administration, they will immediately be characterized as political. And if on the other hand, he allows people like James Inhofe to stick his nose into this process, they will be political. And they will be Republican political, and they'll be obstructionists.
Right. Well, this is, as I say, there is no perfect solution here. But there has to be, I think, some type of as nonpartisan group as we can find. And here's another point, too. If we think we can't find a nonpartisan commission, then what makes us think we can find a nonpartisan special prosecutor?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Elizabeth, we have just a half a minute.
Okay.
Now that Barack Obama has said that he is willing to consider prosecuting senior Bush administration officials, there are a lot of folks who are speculating that the wrath of the right wing is about to fall on his head. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, I don't know. I think the wrath of the right wing is probably ready to fall on his head at any point. Anyway, they're just looking for excuses, and I'm hoping that your guest, who's reinventing the right wing group, is going to say they're going to be reinvented as progressives. Yeah.
Well, they're actually, there was a time in America, Teddy Roosevelt, when conservative and progressive were almost synonymous.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there have, but it was just a brief moment in history. Elizabeth de la Vega. Elizabeth, thanks so much for dropping by.
Okay, thanks.
People can read her piece over at truthout.org. It's called Of Black Holes and Radio Silence, and her book, United States versus George W. Bush et al., is required reading. Check it out at all the usual sources. Elizabeth de la Vega. We'll be right back. Some thoughts on Dick Cheney and what's going on here. Stick around.